All right. Good morning, everybody. It is November 12th, 2025, and this is your pre-market prep. Well, it's really my pre-market prep. So however you do your prep as you do your prep. All right. So let's talk about yesterday. Yesterday was interesting. It was a bank holiday yesterday, and so probably not normal for me to do a pre-market preparation on a bank holiday. I'm usually not trading. I didn't trade yesterday, but I wanted to stick with the plan, which was produce these, promised I would get these out. And it's also interesting to see what happens on a bank holiday. Does this approach actually hold? So let me just talk a little bit about the approach and kind of the idea of where this comes from. The DR IDR work comes from this concept that algorithms are controlling the market predominantly. They control price action, they control movement of the markets, and have for a number of years. And it's kind of validated in the fact in the futures market there's 7 to 8 major market making firms, and their job is to create liquidity in the futures market. Futures market liquidity has just done nothing but increase significantly over the past decade. And so, algorithms are mathematically based. And so, there are mathematical patterns that you can see in the markets because the algorithms kind of run things. When there's a lot of participants coming in besides the algorithms that are trying to, just kind of provide the liquidity and do market making activities, when you have big news events, things like that, then that could muck with the statistics that we're using and kind of what's happening in the market. It's a little bit of where we're at today in the world. Since President Trump came into office and started talking about tariffs, that's really brought in a lot of banks and very large players who were trying to position around world economic events. You see it a lot with oil. Anytime there's anything happening, conflict in the Middle East, oil will do a lot of crazy stuff. So, they kind of override what the algorithms do. When you have a holiday and, nobody's actually really working, then the algorithms just do what they're going to do. And so it was a perfect day yesterday. We got exactly what we expected. This is yesterday's, pre-market. And kind of what we had planned was, let's kind of plan for a downside X plus. And this is E-mini S&P. So we were kind of expecting a downside X plus. In Q, we were actually expecting, something a little bit different because we had a little bit of different movement. So let me just kind of jump here. I think in NQ, what we were looking at was, okay, this is still ES. Sorry, I have to find the right spot where we were. Okay, so NQ. Oh no, NQ is still about the same. We were just running through scenarios. So downside X plus for NQ, and then really strong range expansion if we were to breach this IDR zone right here. So if we were to breach the IDR, we've talked about this a number of times, the IDR low, then we would end up with a really strong range expansion. And so I think that's kind of what our discussion was. So it's downside X plus until this gets breached over here. And then we're really looking at range expansion at that point. And so that's kind of what we were looking at. And yesterday let's go over here to ES. We had the same scenario for ES, by the way. So let me just kind of come up here. We did the same scenario work for ES where we said, okay, if we were to breach, then we're either looking at range expansion or downside. If we broke the midline, we're looking at downside, right? Or if we don't break the midline, then we're looking at downside, right? So we're kind of looking at this kind of these scenarios, like what happens if we breach, what happens if we break the midline, don't break the midline, and just kind of ran through a few of those different scenarios. Actually, it's downside X if we don't break the midline, right? So dominant was this. Okay, this was kind of what we were thinking of as our dominant play. Use a different tool here. Okay, so we're thinking this until we breached this right here, which was our right, which occurred right here before market open. So we knew at this point we were either going to get something that looked like this or something that looked like this. Okay, which is exactly what we got. Right, so we ended up getting this, this kind of range expansion. This is a little bit tough to trade, but once we kind of formed this right here, right, because at this point in time, we know that we're kind of, likely to do range expansion because we kind of broke the midline here. Okay, this broke the midline. We came back down to here. This was a reasonable long. Not a lot of room to it though. That's probably part of the challenge. You kind of expected it to go longer. So there really wasn't much to do here. It was a holiday. So, you don't expect much movement. So we got exactly that with NQ, kind of the opposite, where we actually didn't breach this at all, right? Like notice we didn't really breach it. We didn't really break it until late, and that's irrelevant for us. But it held, and so we got the downside X plus model. So, ES and NQ didn't form the same model. Similar price action movement, but the model work held. We got the primary model in NQ, and we got our secondary model in ES because we clearly broke that key level. So good. Another good day of reading. Let's take a look at today. First thing I want to point out, if you're not doing this, you need to look at this. This isn't Wednesday. This is not Thursday. This is Wednesday. So today is Wednesday, but tomorrow and Friday we have CPI and PPI. And historically, especially right now with interest rates, these are really big news events. And so you just have to keep that in mind. Like this is the day before, 2 full news days. And so I don't expect, I don't know if I expect a really big move today or so much. If I get big moves, I don't expect full follow through. I might expect maybe something that's a little bit choppy. If it's volatile choppy, then we can get big enough moves to kind of get some, good trades in. So we'll have to see. Let's take a look at our data though. So we are upside X plus between ADR and ODR. So we actually have had, really strong bullish movement. We were long in ODR, short but failed. So that this long failed. So this is a false day. And then we're opening inside. Okay, that's really important. I suspect we're going to kind of get a mixture of models where we don't really have a lot of clarity. So let's just take a look here. So we'll do Wednesday, and it's upside X plus, long, false, and open location is inside. Oh, we actually have downside X plus. Okay, so this is telling me, okay, we have downside X plus or contraction. Doubt it's contraction today, but downside X plus, but only 4 records. So we need to take Wednesday off to get more records. And here we get our mixture. We're either downside X plus or range expansion. It's kind of what we're looking at. Downside X plus or range expansion. So what we're kind of anticipating is something that looks like this. Okay. So this would be downside X plus or range expansion, where we kind of get this movement that looks just like this. And just based on this, I'm leaning toward range expansion, especially if we open above here, right? Where we had a downside X plus model that was pretty strong, and then we kind of have range expansion. If we kind of do this movement here, until, let's see, we kind of go up here like this, I might expect, a kind of a move back down like this, something like that. So that would be one scenario that I'd be looking for just based on the data. We do have, there is some upside X plus, upside X data. It's not a ton, right? Just even combined, that's not too much going on. Like, I don't even think combined it matches, the downside X plus as a dominant. So it could happen where we just take off and go up like this, but I'm thinking maybe something more like this, or we get one of the cousins, right? Because it's so messy. We get like a downside model or something like that. So we'll have to see. Not a lot of clarity on this one. I think we'll probably end up with the same here. So if we look at NQ, let's just check NQ's data. Let's see what we get. And NQ Wednesday, probably end up taking Wednesday off. Upside X plus long, false, inside. Wednesday we have 10 records, not a ton. We'll take those off, and still very range expansion. So all these others are pretty much equal, but range expansion. So yeah, it looks very much like we're working toward a range expansion model here for the open on NQ. So again, if you have been listening to these, when I talk about range expansion, I'm talking about you wait until one of the sides and edges is formed, and then you can start looking for the possible, breakdown or move up, break out to the other side. So we could do that. We could do this, right? Something like this. Boom, 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 right? So you can either break down first and then back up. You could break up and then back down. So one of those two. All right. So I'm not going to do these, any of these tomorrow or Friday. We have news coming out exactly when I tend to do these, and the news tends to skew a lot of the data that we have. And so, I'm just take a break. No pre-market prep tomorrow, November 13th or November 14th, because of the big news that's happening at 8:30. All right, guys, have an awesome day trading and make great decisions. Till next time, later.